Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson. Matthew Dickerson. Tech Talk. Sit back and relax. It's time to talk technology.
Hello, front row sitters. Welcome to your uninterrupted view of the tech talkingest podcast in the West. Grab your popcorn, pour yourself an extra large drink. Welcome to Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson. Now, in today's episode, we'll check out tiny robots that are ready to dive into your mouth and dance around your teeth to make your next dental appointment more like a tiny robot party. And doesn't that sound like fun, folks? We'll take a look at who's taken the lead in the race for the biggest and best supercomputer in the world, and we'll see what crazy antics Japanese robot builders have been up to, and you'll never guess what. But before any of that can happen, we've got to call in our resident techspert. Welcome to the microphone, Matthew Dickerson.
Thank you very much. Very happy to be here. Very happy to see you again. Very happy to hear your intros. Always like to hear what you're going to come up with in your intros. Now, this week I've been playing around more. I'm just having so much fun at the moment with electricity and different plans and different prices and all sorts of different amazing things we do because where we're at with our modern metering. So I thought I'd go back and have a bit of a look at the history of metering.
Oh, I'm strap yourselves in, folks. Right.
So when we first, and this isn't just Australia, around the world, when we first had electricity taken to people's homes, and we're talking about probably 1880s or so, maybe 1890s, they used to charge you based on how many lights you had. So they'd walk in, they go, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right, 5 lights for you, sir. We've got X dollars we'll charge for you for your 5 lights.
So that was before you had electrical anything else, I presume?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Because
so you just had light bulbs, there were no power points in your house.
Right.
Okay.
And what they found, surprisingly enough, is that people didn't care if they left them on all the time because all they were paying for was the light. So I've got a light. Why turn it off? No save electricity, no save the coal-fired power. It's just leave it turned on all the time because, hey, I'm paying for that light. I might as well leave it on.
Makes sense.
Didn't take long before they went, you know what, we should put some sort of metering on. So around the 1890s, they started putting metering on to actually meter our electricity, which probably closely resembled how many lights you had, but now people maybe turn them off. Not a big plan, not a big focus on saving electricity because not much was being used anyway.
Yeah.
And then the next big change happened after the Second World War. So we had a lot of manufacturing capability that went towards producing military stuff. And then once the war had finished, thankfully, happily, people are being killed anymore. What do we do with all this manufacturing capability? We don't need all this warfare stuff. What can we do? So they started turning those same manufacturing skills into washing machines or refrigerators or stuff that was useful around our homes, fantastic, but that suddenly used a bit more electricity. So you start plugging in big machinery, I say big machinery compared to light bulbs, that's using a lot more electricity. So our solution here in Australia, probably late 40s, maybe 50s, 60s, was to produce big coal-fired power stations because you needed all this power, stoves, ovens, fridges, washing machines, maybe dryers even. Yeah. All these things used a fair bit. And when did you use all those? You used all those when you came home from work. So you came home, maybe 6 o'clock, turn all these things on, turn the stove on, the fridge is going all day, turn all these things on. And so producing power was a big thing where we had to have lots of power at that time, but then they found these coal-fired power stations, you couldn't really just turn them down overnight, turn it back up the next morning, turn it down in the middle of the day.
Yeah.
And so that's
got one year and that's go.
Yeah, that's it, go flat out. So that's when they came up with off-peak power, or controlled load is the technical name for it. The Zellweger ripple control receiver was a big thing when it was introduced. 1953 was the first one that came to Australia, but that was in its early days. So electricity authorities, mostly owned by the government of the day, came up with this concept of off-peak power. We'll put a second meter in for you and you can have really cheap electricity, but you can only have it when we say you can have it, and we use our ripple control receivers to turn it on and off at certain times, typically overnight.
Right.
So now you can hook up your big hot water system. You don't need that on during the day.
During the day, yeah.
You can heat up and store that because water's got a good thermal mass about it, so it'll keep that pretty hot most of the day, just turn on each night. So then you start to look for things that you could run overnight. So maybe a pool pump maybe filtering your pool. You don't need to do that all day. I'm swimming in it. I don't need it going then. I can have it going at night time. So that introduced this whole concept of off-peak power. But it was a bit of mucking around. You had to have separate wiring to a separate meter to then be able to run those different devices at those different times.
Yeah.
But that's what every house did. Every house had off-peak, and you had those things wired in. Jump forward to today. There's lots that happened between 1953 and today, but I'm giving the short version here.
Yeah.
Jump forward to today, and now we have got so much more in terms of technology. So we've got time of use metering.
Everything is powered by electricity these days, isn't it?
Correct.
So,
and now it's a bit clumsy, and houses are still wired like this, but more and more they're being wired not with a separate meter anymore, because with a separate meter, you've got to make the decision to say, I'm going to have that wired into a separate meter and only have access to that at certain times. So you might wire in now, you're in a modern environment, an electric vehicle charger. But if you really want to put a bit of charge in during the day because I've got to go away somewhere, it's not coming on till tonight when I've got cheap electricity. That's no good to me. So time of use metering is where it's all gone. And this is giving electricity companies so much flexibility from the beginning of this financial year, from the 1st of July in this financial year, in New South Wales definitely, and to a lesser extent Queensland and Victoria, 3 hours of free electricity is provided by the state is saying this is compulsory for electricity retailers. So between 11 and 2 typically, you get free electricity, but you can only do that with a time of use meter. So it knows what time it is. Some of them are down to every minute. Most of them are down to every 5 minutes. So it knows what time it is. So we can charge different rates for you. So now, rather than have to have separate wiring to run my off-peak hot water, off my pool filter, whatever it might be, I just run it between 11 and 2 and automatically my meter's smart enough to give me that electricity for free. Now, sorry, before I go any further, I must say, choose the plan. Don't just assume automatically because I said so that you've got free electricity in those hours. You've got to have the right plan to be on. But some of the plans are very cheap overnight. So there's some plans that go between midnight and 4 a.m. or midnight and 6 a.m. that are now down as low as I found 4.5 cents. I've found a few that are 6 cents, 8 cents. So forget off-peak, which was typically, say, 20 cents. This is now using it when your time of use meter says you're using it, but use it for whatever you want. So plug your EV in if you want, or run your filter, or go and turn all the lights on the house if you want, because it's just recording when you're using electricity, not what you're doing with that electricity, which is what used to happen with the old off-peak / controlled load. So now the plans are becoming cleverer. You've got peak, shoulder, off-peak, super off-peak, overnight. There's a whole range of plans. You need a spreadsheet, definitely, which would bring joy to your ears.
It's definitely worth doing a little bit more research, a little bit of homework on that.
It is, and looking at what you're doing. And so it's not just, some people have said, if only we could feed our electricity bill into some system and it would tell us what to use. Well, you can do that. There are sites out there that allow you to do that. But that's assuming you're using electricity in the same way you're using it now. But you might modify what you do when you've got all this flexibility. And I'm not saying change the way you do everything, but for example, in the past, you might have charged your car overnight because the electricity was cheaper, but now you might charge your car in the middle of the day because it's free.
Yeah.
So do you start to modify what you do?
Well, here's the thing. Yeah. So with my own plan, I was looking at that, and we recently received a letter to explain how the charges are changing, and they brought down some charges for us, which is very generous of them, but some have also gone up. And the charges for our daily use, we've got batteries now. Our charges for our daily uses have come down by, 0.8 of a cent or something, maybe a bit less than 0.8 of a cent. But the charges per day for just being hooked up to the system have gone up by 30 cents.
That's right. And that's where they get you sometimes too, isn't it?
And so we've got to find a way of winning this battle.
Yeah, and so I think it does need a spreadsheet. So get your spreadsheets out, folks, and punch in things like you said. The daily supply charge, just to be connected, is a certain fee. And so some of them say, we'll give you free electricity for these many hours. We'll give you super cheap electricity, and you get sucked in by that and then don't realise that the amount you pay per day is a lot dearer. And hold on, I'm saving 5 cents over here and paying 40 cents over there. Well, that doesn't sound right. Yeah. But it is. It's very complicated. I find that there are so many different plans to look at. And then think about how you use your electricity now, and then how you would like to use your electricity, or how flexible you could be with your electricity.
Finding that flexibility, I think.
And I'm not saying to people, make sure if you want to dry the clothes, get up at 2 a.m. and put them in the dryer and sit there and watch it then. I mean, you've still got to live your life, but can you use some programming? So if I take the example of EVs again, most EVs that I've seen, in fact, all of them that I've seen, allow you to schedule when you want the car to charge.
Yeah.
So you can come home, plug it in at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, but then schedule it not to start charging till midnight or whenever might be some cheaper rates. So you might use some of that scheduling more rather than just using what you've done in the past. So changing what you do, looking at the plans, it's just so much excitement out there. And it's all based around the fantastic concept we've got with meeting. Gone are the days where you'd see guys and girls walking around with meter reader on their shirt and walking up to your house. Hi, how you going, sir? I'm just going to read your meter. Those days are long gone. It's all read electronically and read. Now I find that you can look at an app with your plan and typically you can see electricity you've used not just from your own side, but from the company that provides power to you, maybe as recently as, say, yesterday. Usually not real time, but pretty much the day or maybe 2 days after you've used it, and you can see what's happening with your electricity bill on that sort of minute or just kind of that granular basis. Yeah, it's fascinating.
Fascinating. All right, we better get started for today's stories. Now, social media bans for young people are a trend that has caught on in 40 countries since Australia led the charge back in December last year. Apparently, though, if you interview enough young people here in Oz, not too much has changed. It appears that the ban works best in keeping out the good kids. Well, it's a fight that the Albanese government reckon is worth winning, and so they're working on upping the heat on social media, turning up the heat on social media companies to take a greater responsibility. What are the evolving details there, Matt?
It is quite nice, I think, that we have led the charge on this. And I'm sure Australia or the Australian government is not the number one or isn't supported number one by some of the social media companies because it's a bit of the opening of the dam, isn't it? Yeah. In Australia, they got away with it. That's working. Damn it now, as you say, 40 countries, and it will continue to go up. But I've done my own, and it's not good enough. It's not survey research. I've just done my own little spot surveys when I've had the opportunity. I don't go out looking for under 16-year-olds on the streets, just for anyone that's worried about me walking around saying hello to young kids. When I see some young kids with parents or I've got some people that I know that have got kids that are under 16, I typically say to the kids or say to those parents, how much has it changed? And the general response I receive back has been, it hasn't. And so the follow-up question is, what have you done to get around it to the kids? And they say, nothing. It actually hasn't taken effect. So, yes, there are some steps that the social media companies have put in place, but generally they actually haven't done anything because it's not in their best interest. So one of the things, and so that's my little spot surveys or just talking to people generally, but the E-Safety Commissioner for Australia says that 7 in 10 children under 16 who previously had social media accounts have still retained access. So my little spot surveys kind of marry up to what that's saying, which is basically 70, most kids are out there still using it.
70%.
That's right. And I was waiting when I first started asking some kids about this and said, what are you doing to get around it? I was waiting for all the creative ways they were going to use to get around these bans, but no, they didn't have creative ways. They just kept using it, waiting to be shut down, and they weren't actually shut down. Now, we recognise it's difficult, and we've talked about this before. Age verification via facial ID, via your behaviour, by what you do, all sorts of things. We were thinking about what they might do, what the companies might do. It seems to me they haven't done much. From all the things they could have done, they haven't done much. So the Australian government has said, we're pretty serious about this. We're going to double the fine. $99 million for the company, not for the parent, not for the child, for the company, if you're not doing enough. And then they're doing some, or changing the laws to basically compel technology companies to provide evidence to show what they've done. And then also they're starting to launch some investigations into the alleged non-compliance of some of these big companies. So show us what you've done. We think you haven't done anything over here, so we're going to go and whack you with this one. I'm keen to see the first fines, James. I reckon $99 million might start to just make them a little bit more aware because at the moment, the threat, the old, you may be fined up to, people go, yeah, but they won't hit us with that. If they actually hit someone with that, that might make them think about it. But the other thing is, I find it fascinating. Imagine if they said to a car company, all car companies, we've introduced a new speed limit on a road, and we're not going to fine Matthew if he speeds along there. We're not going to fine anyone else in the car if they speed on that road. We're going to fine the car company. We're going to fine Toyota or Holden or Subaru or whoever it might be for speeding on that road.
Well, that's an interesting analogy you've drawn there.
And I started thinking about that, and I'm thinking, no car company would say that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Everyone would say the individual driving that car, surely they're the ones responsible. So with no consequences for kids using social media apps if they're under 16, no consequences for parents, they're not really that focused on doing something about it. Some parents care about their kids, so they might be, but
there's your 30% of people who have been shut out. Yeah,
yeah, quite possibly. So 30% of
often
kids.
rules just keep out the people who are willing to follow the rules.
So we're saying there's 30% of people in Australia who care about their kids. But it's an interesting thing.
Well, yeah, you give a box of matches to kids and a bag of fireworks and then say, hey, listen, don't use these.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then you find Redhead, the batch company, if they go and light a fire with it. So it's a tough one. I mean, I understand why they're doing that, because they've got the ability to pay, and it's in their best interest to keep those kids on there, so they're going to try and make it easy as possible.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating, though. UK is probably the main one that I've looked at that's really following down a very direct path that we've gone down. They've got their own social media restrictions they're talking about, but they're also looking at a couple of other ones on top, over and above.
So they've gone a little bit harder than what the Australian government has.
One of the ones they've done I thought was interesting is they're trying to introduce measures to reduce infinite scrolling for kids under 18. Now, I don't agree with that in the first place, because we know infinite is too big. You can't count that. So kids aren't scrolling infinitely. They're scrolling a lot, but they can't scroll infinitely. But I understand the concept they're trying to do there is to say, let's reduce the amount of doom scrolling that you've got with that. So that's an interesting one as well. Overnight social media curfews they're talking about as well in the UK. So they've recognised that it's not just the under 16, it's probably younger people as well, 17 years of age, maybe, or 16 and 17, so maybe some extra measures there. So I think we've started something here in this country, which is great, but I wonder how they're finding going to get some of these big companies on board, and maybe it is just straight dollars. They start getting hit with a few fines. Maybe the shareholders of those companies start to go, should we do something? Maybe.
Wouldn't social responsibility be a wonderful thing if people just had social responsibility?
Yeah, maybe, especially big companies. I'm sure they do have a lot of social responsibility. But it's fascinating. I'd love to hear from people if they do have some information about their kids not being able to get on social media apps now. I think it's better at stopping new people from joining rather than people that have already got an account. So maybe it'll take a few years to flow through. But not a lot's changed at this stage.
We all know that a trip to the dentist is a necessary thing, but still so many people list it as a reference point for their least preferred task. Now, I'm sorry, James, I won't be able to paint you a spare room with you today. I'd rather go to the dentist. Well, there's one of my memorable rejections. So if you've got some major dental work coming up, perhaps a crown, for example, then you're going to want to make it as smooth and efficient as a process as possible. Dental engineers appreciate this. So one clever group has designed a tiny robot to dance about inside your mouth and do all the prep work in one fell swoop. Now, this sounds like a tiny robot party in your mouth. The trip to the dentist has never been so fun.
So you can't talk when the dentist
No, you can't.
is working away in your mouth.
No.
And I just wondered...
It's a harsh job.
It is. How much harder would it be to talk with a robot inside your mouth? So this is a very specific robot. It's designed for dental crowns specifically. Now, I've never had a dental crown, but it seems like a bit of a drama when people have one, where they've got to go through and they've got to remove some of the material around the tooth that needs a crown on it, so they can actually get the crown on there. They've got to then take some impressions. They've got to wait for the crown to be manufactured and then come back. So sometimes it can take several visits to the dentist and then basically get that final fitting done. So this is a very specific robot in that its whole job is to prepare and do everything it needs to do for you to have a crown put in on a tooth in your mouth, have all the work done beforehand, so you can do it all in one visit and then still come back for the crown once that crown's been made for your particular tooth. But all done in one job sounds like a pretty good job. And then maybe how far away is it before the dentist will have some printer out the back that the measurements are being done while the crown's being, or your tooth's being prepared.
Yeah, wow.
And they say, give us 10 minutes and we'll print that out and away we go.
Or it could be printing as it's taking the measurements.
That's right, yeah, that's right. So that's not there yet, so don't get too excited. But it sounds like a pretty good thing to do in terms of getting everything done, because you're right, getting all that prep work done and you go, I've got to come back again. And it is hard.
All the while you've got this busted tooth that you're trying to get fixed up too.
Yeah, that's right. Either it looks terrible because it's a busted lost a tooth maybe at the front of your mouth, or even just chewing, I'd imagine, if you've got some sharp edges there. And anyway, so anyone that's had a crown would know that it's not a fun thing to do. This particular robot is called a miniature intraoral robot, MIR, which MIR, I like that. I like they've got initialism there. But MIR seems like there's some other things that have got MIR or MIR, so maybe they need to come up with a different one there. But so
you're thinking of the old space station there.
Well, I'm thinking of that. I'm thinking of some other ones that just, infrared. When I see IR, it just feels like infrared.
Yeah.
So
someone's being lazy.
Yeah, that's right. Come up with something better. But intraoral, so basically it's getting inside your mouth. Now, what I thought was clever about it as well is kind of the robot exterior attaches to your head. So if you do move your head during part of the process, it's okay. It's fine. Because normally you'd have to keep your head very still because this robot's working away and then it starts drilling away at the wrong tooth because you moved your head a little bit, or you try to move your jaw and answer when the robot asks you something. So this attaches to your head. So if you move your head, the whole robot moves with your head, which I thought was quite clever.
And the other bonus is the dentist can go and have a cup of tea.
That's right.
Have his lunch, and come back.
That's right. Now, so it's only small, 4.3 centimetres by 2.5, or for those more familiar with other SI units, it's the size of a wine cork. That seems like a big wine cork to me, 2.5. So I suppose about right. So small enough to fit inside there and work away, and that's part of their challenge as well. Getting it small enough with the motors and the devices that it needs on there to be able to do all of that inside your mouth. But it's got these big sort of tubes or drive shafts that connects it to the robot on the outside of your head as well. It's an ugly looking thing, I must admit. It's go and look it up. Go and look up MIR.
Someone's got to soup it up and give it a cover so it looks a little bit more
it's a smiling
like
face,
Iron
maybe.
Man or something like that. But right now, it's going to look like something's torturing it. Like, that's the last thing you want to think about when you're at the dentist.
Don't think about that. Right.
More torture appliances.
Maybe just tell some dad jokes while it's working away and just something like that. So I just think it's this whole thing. We're getting robots part of our life. We're getting specific robots part of our general life. It's happening with robotics, and people will keep coming up with other robotics. We're getting smaller motors. We're getting more accuracy. When this actually applies the crown itself, they're saying it can get its accuracy to within 0.2 millimetres of exactly where it should be. Wow. And I reckon that's pretty good. I reckon if a dentist got a crown on my tooth that was plus or minus 1 millimetre, I'd say, it's probably fair enough. 0.2 sounds pretty impressive. Yeah. I don't think I'd be able to spot the difference between 0.2 plus or minus on a crown.
You wouldn't feel it with your tongue.
You wouldn't even feel it with your tongue, that's right. And that'd be the most annoying part if you could. That'd be bad. Who do you complain to? So it's not being used yet in dental surgeries. Don't go down to your local dentist and say, can I have this?
But it's on the way.
University of Basel in Switzerland is developing this. But it doesn't take long. Sometimes we talk about these things and blow me down. We're talking about something 6 months later and it's in operation. So don't have to be quite that quick.
If it fixes to your head, surely they can put a little visor over your eyes and you could be watching a TV show. Watch some YouTube or something like that while you're at it too.
Yeah,
something to distract you from the
That's
the
exactly
torture.
what you need, distraction.
Phone addiction. Many of us will freely admit that we spend too much time wasting our lives away on our phones. It's changed the very nature of our social interactions and even created barriers in our shared spaces, like the dining table, for example. The very nature of an app's design is to be used. The success of an app is in the number of hours it runs on your phone and the interactions that it initiates. App makers rely on the dopamine hits, and so they feed the beast incessantly. But Matt, a new wave social trend is turning the cold shoulder and teaching us all to put it down. Is that right?
Maybe, hopefully putting it down. I'm not sure if people are actually getting there.
Right,
They're trying. They're trying.
Yeah. Well, the first step in shaking an addiction is the want.
Well, the first step is to admit you've got the addiction, isn't it? To say,
okay.
I have had an addiction now. Let's see what I can do about it. There was a survey recently that said 70%, maybe it's the same 70% as the last story, but 70% of adults believe they spend too much time on their phone. So that's fine. Okay, I'll spend too much time on my phones while they're reading a story on their phone or completing a survey on their phone about how much time they spend.
Watching a reel about this. Yeah,
That's right.
Okay, gotcha.
So it's not yet recognised as an official addiction in terms of phone addiction. It's not a medical condition yet. But there are some people that are arguing that maybe it should be an official medical condition because there's a rapid increase in people seeking help for this type of problem. So the UK Addiction Treatment Centre said that 6 years ago, 1 in 10 people said whatever their primary addiction was, whether it might be drugs, whether it might be alcohol, which is, I suppose, a drug, or whatever their primary addiction was, 1 in 10 had a secondary phone dependency. Now, in the latest research from the UK Addiction Treatment Centres, 1 in 3 people said phone dependency secondary. And it kind of makes sense. If you're an addictive personality and you've got an addiction to something, again, say a substance, for example, then probably you're going to be more likely to be addicted to something else, i.e. your phone.
Yeah.
But 1 in 3, so you turn up because you're addicted to alcohol or you're addicted to something else. And my phone, well, don't take my phone away. I'm addicted to that as well. So that's fascinating. But smartphones and the apps, probably more so than the smartphone itself, is quite clever. We've got this dopamine reward system. So when we get a notification, when we get a like on something, when we get some little thing, we get this little burst of dopamine that says, oh, that feels good. So then you go looking for more. You're looking for more rewards, more likes, more things on your phone. So that's where you just start to get this reward cycle, which, again, people with compulsive sort of personality start to feel like that's just all they can think about. So if you've got gambling problems, alcohol problems, drug problems, then you're probably going to have some sort of similar issue with phones.
They've done tests on mice where mice have starved themselves to death in preference to getting dopamine hits. So given a choice, a tap where a food was released or where dopamine was released, they'd go backwards and forwards, and then they'd stop going backwards and forwards and just keep tapping on the dopamine.
There you go.
Until they passed away.
So we aren't much above the mice in terms of our desire for dopamine.
Dopamine is that powerful a hormone. Yeah.
So, I mean, there's all sorts of things. You've got the Internet and Technology Addicts Anonymous. I didn't know that existed, but the ITAA, they've got a 12-step recovery model specifically for people with phone addiction. So it is becoming a much bigger issue. People that are members of this or that are in this organisation describe when they finally kind of break the addiction that they've lost months, they've lost years of their life being in this rabbit hole. I'm going home to get on my phone. I'm not working anymore because I'm on my phone. I'm just, again, as you say, probably just everything else becomes irrelevant outside the rewards they get from using their phone. Yeah. So modern smartphones, if you ever play with any of those, you see the screen time features, the wellbeing features, which is fine, but people have got to take notice of them. They've got to look at them and use them and then recognise that this is giving them some sort of a warning.
Yeah.
The other thing I think is that I would say that if I take drugs, if I smoke, if I'm maybe a gambler that's spending too much money, inherently some of those things are harmful, but inherently using a phone in small doses, like taking drugs in small doses doesn't sound like a good thing.
No.
Using your phone how it's meant to be used in small doses is probably a good thing. You're probably listening to a great podcast right now on a phone. So inherently,
thank you for that.
It's not a bad thing, but it's just when you start to ramp up the hours, too much of anything.
When it gets out of, beyond moderation.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Moderation, everything in moderation except moderation itself. Or is that it?
Well, I've got to share with you, for the longest time I held on to my tiny little phone. It was a Motorola, I seem to remember, and it didn't have any connection to the internet or anything like that. And so I held on to that one for the longest time because I just knew if I had access to videos, I'd just go watching those videos. And I've caught myself a number of times going, oh, you've got to move on. Your life is wasting away.
That's right.
Yeah, and we've all been there, surely.
We were at the footy the other night, and on the screen cam they had around there, they were obviously advertising don't use your phone while you're driving. So we're at a live sporting event and the camera focused around on that woman that we saw there on her phone, and she had her phone down, I think it was 27 seconds, wasn't it, before finally she looked up and realised that she's on this huge screen in the stadium. So you're at a live sporting event, but still you've got your head down.
Know, the cameraman had been watching her for a while before, knowing, we've got someone who might be attacking. Yeah.
So it might have been another 30 seconds before that. But that's what gets me. You're at an event like that with 40,000 of your closest friends and watching this great contest happening, and you look around and people have got their heads buried down in their phone.
Well, it seems to be the thing at a concert now. You don't watch the concert, you just film it. You've got it on your camera, and you've got all these hands with cameras up to film. Just enjoy the moment.
Because if it wasn't on Instagram, it didn't happen. I went to a concert the night, show me the video. Oh, well, no, you didn't go. Don't believe you.
Yeah. In the modern world where access to everything needs a password and everything comes with a pricey subscription, people are understandably looking for loopholes. So it's not uncommon for families and friends that someone might take responsibility for, say, the Netflix account, and someone else might have the Disney Plus. Someone else will support the team with the Amazon Prime subscription, etc., etc. Everyone benefits from a loosely guarded password or two. But Matt, playing the game with AI engines becomes, it needs to come with a caveat, surely.
It is quite funny. I've actually heard some stories before. I found this particular story. I heard some stories from people that were doing exactly this. They had one person in the family that had their AI account and they shared it with the rest of the family. And then they got a phone call one day. Oh, so I see you've got a bit of an issue with your left hamstring. How'd you know that? Oh, I was just reading your chats the other day.
You say left hamstring as a nice little...
Possibly.
Yeah, it was something else. That's an analogy for something else, yeah?
It could have been left hamstring. That might be a euphemism.
Yeah.
So everything you type in there, every question you ask,
yeah.
And one of the great things that I love about having access to these various AI tools is that sometimes people are a bit embarrassed to ask even their doctor. But they're not too embarrassed to ask AI. But then they should be if they share their password because the whole chat history is there. Yeah. So it could be about your job, your finances. It could be about a work colleague. How do I deal with this work colleague? And then you're working with that work colleague and you share password because you're doing some project together and you read back and go, so you're having a problem with a work colleague. Was that me, perhaps?
Yeah. Which work colleague was that?
Yeah. So it's quite funny because it's happening more than I realise. I mean, all of the AI companies say this is an individual account. It's not to be shared amongst a family or amongst friends or whatever. It's an individual account. But more and more people are using it in families, in study groups, for example. So we're working on a project together here. It'll make it easier for us if we just share our account. So everything that you look up, I can see what you've done already, which sounds great until you realise that the history goes back and back and back.
Forever. So, look, and so, different AI engines do different things better than each other. So it might be understandable that you might have 2 or 3 AI engine accounts.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so I think there's probably a lesson here for the AI companies as well. If I go back in the dark old days when you had your iCloud account, Apple's iCloud account, it wasn't uncommon. We used to see in one of our businesses, a lot of people would come in and it would be mum and dad and the kids all in the same iCloud account. And that kind of was okay in the very early days because all they got out of it was the ability to connect to those phones. You didn't have much information shared. But then I remember vividly a gentleman came in one day and he said, I've got to do something about this because we'd shared an iCloud account for all the time that we've had iPhones. And my daughter, when she first got an iPhone, was probably 12 years of age. And so we had that same iCloud account. She's just gone off to university and I'm reading text messages that I'm sure that I don't want to read and my daughter doesn't want me to read.
Wow.
So how do we fix that? Right, you need your own iCloud account, sir. And so what Apple did in that scenario was it used to start off, again, I'm sure as a cost-saving measure for people and probably convenience, have the one iCloud account and connect to different devices, do it across the whole family. Then they realised what was happening with kids going off to university and parents not wanting to read that. So then they said you can have a family account and each individual account under that is your own individual account, but you can share purchases. For example, if you go and buy a movie, you can all the people on that shared account can watch it, or if you have storage space, you can all share that. Yeah. So I think AI companies have probably got to learn something from that and sure, have a master account. And then without charging each individual extra money, that master account allows individual logins that are your individual private login. Some of them have got some things like that now, but I suppose if they really want to enforce it and say, no, only one person, it's pretty easy to work it out. If you're sitting there asking about menopause and the next question is asking about, how do I get a date tonight on Tinder, then you're probably going, maybe these two aren't the same person. And I've used 2 bad examples there, but think osteoporosis and I don't know, something that's, playing rugby and getting injured or something. So you probably can work out ways, the AI tool can work out ways this isn't the same person. Yeah. But they've just got to work out ways to encourage people, to make it attractive for people to not share those.
People just got to be aware.
Or embarrass people enough.
You go on the internet, then people are going to know about it if you're not careful.
One of the things that I am constantly fascinated about is I'll ask a question and the answer I'll get back will say, well, Matthew, because, and then it will rattle off something that I asked it 3 months ago. I mean, take the electricity price, for example. When I was researching electricity prices, it said, well, Matthew, because you've got a battery and solar panels, then this would be a good plan for you. Now, I didn't say in that particular chat that I had battery and solar panels. But previously, somewhere, obviously, I'd mentioned battery and solar panels. So it's remembering that. And that's the thing that happens. It's okay for me individually, but that's the thing that's happening. It's remembering all this stuff about you. And then if you start asking questions from a different household, it mightn't make sense, some of the answers you get.
Yeah. With a ridiculous level of computing power now at pretty much everyone's fingertips, you may have forgotten that there are still things out there called supercomputers. And you probably forgot that nations still compete to build the fastest and highest powered supercomputers. Maybe it's just me. Maybe it all just seems like the base for a storyline out of a James Bond movie from 2 decades ago. Anyway, I guess it makes sense. The news out of today is that despite efforts from the US to restrict other nations in their capacity to build bigger, better, faster computers, China has gone and done it anyway. And this new Chinese supercomputer plays a cracking game of Minesweeper, Matt.
I think it would be pretty good. Solitaire, I was thinking, actually.
Yeah, right.
Imagine how fast those next cards would come out. Wow, look at how quick that supercomputer is.
It's like you could play like so many hands in one go.
So let's talk some really interesting numbers. So there is a ranking that called a top 500 ranking, which surprisingly enough is the top 500 computers, fastest computers on the planet. And China hasn't been on top of that list since 2018. And you're quite right in what you said, that America is going, no, we're not going to let China have some of these new AI chips because we don't like China, so we'll just keep them for ourselves. And China said, well, we're going to do it anyway. We're going to make this fast computer. So 2018 was when they were last on top. The current leader before this computer was one in the US called El Capitan. Doesn't sound like a really US name.
We talked about this before, El Capitan. Yeah.
So that was on top until now. This new one is called Line Shine. They've got to come up with some better names, haven't they? Line Shine doesn't say to me, wow, fast supercomputer. It just says there's a strange name. So
Dark Lord or something like that.
That's right, rule of the world. So Line Shine is the newest. Now, it's the first supercomputer to exceed 2,000 exaflops of computing. I would have said 2 zettaflops personally, but 2,000 exaflops is how they're quoting it. Now, let's talk about...
Sorry, you've just gone into the prefixes that are beyond me. So
let's talk about a flop, floating point operation per second. So one flop is probably, I reckon, about what a human could do. Maybe not even quite that. So one mathematical calculation, if you like.
Right.
I don't think it's quite as simple as 5 plus 7 equals 12, but let's think about it like that. So I reckon I can do one flop as a human. This can do 2,000 exaflops. So exa being 10 to the power of 18.
Right.
Or, again, I would go on zeta. Zeta is 10 to the power of 21. So 2 by 10 to the power of 21.
How many times have you used that zeta prefix before?
At least twice.
Okay, all right.
In the last 3 minutes.
Zeta. Zeta comes after exa.
Yeah, correct.
All right.
Z-E-T-T-A.
And exa comes after Terra.
Is there one in
Terra?
between? No, Terra would be 10 to the 15, wouldn't it?
Yeah. That'll do me.
Yep. So when you've got 2 by 10 to the 21 floating point operation per second, I thought let's break that down into something that makes sense. So if every human on the planet, all 8 billion, almost, that's kind of where I went. If all 8 billion of us said we're going to start doing some mathematical calculations and show up this computer, because there's 8 billion of us, to do 2 by 10 to the power of 21 floating point operations, forget about the seconds, just to do that many calculations, it would take the planet about 7,900 years. Let's call it 8,000. 8,000 years doing one per second. So that gives you an idea of the sort of raw grunt, the raw computing power.
Yeah.
But it gets scarier than that. So, and that's 20% faster than El Capitan.
Everyone's got to be doing those mathematical calculations every second.
Every second
of
8,000 years. Correct.
Yeah. No.
So then you start to think, well, how did China do this when they haven't got access to some of these latest chips? Because America has said, no, you can't have them. And what they've done is they've basically said, we're going to use general purpose processors and basically connect them together in probably what I would call an inefficient way. So it doesn't use GPUs, which is what all the big computers now use out of America. So it's using 45,000 processors. Each one's got about 304 processing cores, and combining all of those is how they've got the computing power, but at a cost. The GPUs are much more efficient. So the cost of this, El Capitan uses 29.7 megawatts. This uses 42.2 megawatts of electricity. Now again, let's break it down to another SI unit, kettles. That's about the equivalent of turning 21,000 kettles on, assuming most kettles are about 2 kilowatts. So 21,000 kettles or one supercomputer.
Right.
That's some serious power.
I wonder what they're calculating or what they're doing with it, because that's a cracking game of centipede.
It is.
And I just, Well,
so typically,
where do you get to the point where these things become more powerful than you could possibly ever need?
well, normally what I see supercomputers used for, and often they'll be rented out. I'm not sure that the Chinese ones are rented out, but often universities will rent some space, some time on a supercomputer. And typically what I find is they're used for anything that uses modelling that's got a lot of variables. So, for example, climate modelling, absolutely, they're used for climate modelling often. Even weather forecasting, put a bunch of variables in, doesn't mean anything. Was it a coincidence that the air pressure was this and that the water or the humidity and all these things, or was it just something that really gives us a good indication of what the weather's going to be like next week, next month, next year, whatever? So a lot of those things, when you've got things like medicine, if you're trying to do some drug testing, not on people, but not even on mice, but some drug modelling. So maybe aerospace design, how will this interact with space? How will this interact when it's going through at Mach 1.5, for example? What's happening with the shock waves around that? So anything that's got lots of variables, someone's writing a pretty impressive bit of software in the first place that's going to need this amount of power to actually do the calculation. I mean, I get a bit frustrated sometimes on my computer when I've written a bit of code and it takes 2 or 3 seconds to actually calculate something. I'm not sure that I could justify taking that down to a millisecond on a supercomputer, because it still takes me a few seconds to work out the answer anyway, when it's giving me the answer, what that actually means. So anything that's got some of those big models, those like even nuclear explosions, what would happen in a nuclear explosion somewhere? I'm sure someone's done some modelling on this. If someone dropped a bomb somewhere, what would that look like? What would the equivalent of Hiroshima look like after that nuclear explosion? And again, so many variables. How does that building interact with that building when that building is moving at a great speed because of that great blast of energy that's just come from that nuclear weapon? So, yeah, fascinating stuff. But the race is on still. The race is not slowing down. Yeah. It's still continuing on.
Supercomputers are still a thing.
Still a thing, that's right, yeah. So it's quite fascinating. So just generally drop around the next barbecue a flop or a Zeta and see if your friends still talk to you.
Following on from that last story, computing has always been about upgrading the power while downsizing the size. A single processing chip today contains several billions of transistors. Each one is a little stop-go gate to share the ones and the zeros around that you would allow you to share cat videos effortlessly with people on the other side of the planet. That's several billion transistors on a chip the size of your fingernail. And wouldn't you know it, Matt, they've designed chips now and redesigned them to hold even more.
It's a bit of an issue at the moment because if we go back to Moore's Law is often misquoted, but it was back in 1965 that Gordon Moore said, the complexity for minimum component costs has increased at a rate of roughly a factor of 2 per year. Now that's basically been translated into the power of a computer doubles every 2 years or the number of transistors on a chip doubles every 2 years, which is fine. But when you talk about doubling, it's the old joke that you say to someone, look, I am tempted to give you $1 million today. Would you like that? Or would you like $1 today? And I'll just double it every day for a month. And of course, most people just jump straight at the $1 million because $1, that's nothing. And how could it possibly be any more than $1 million? Well, if you did that trick, then by the end of 30 days, you'd end up with $1.07 billion. So the doubling concept is the exponential growth of anything is quite incredible. So when you start to talk about doubling the number of transistors or doubling the power of a computer every 2 years, for example, 1965, sure, that was easy to do back then because you had a lot of room for growth. We're at the stage now with transistors, with chips, we're actually approaching some sort of level of atomic scale. So we know about an atom, roughly. We kind of understand what that is. We don't think there's much smaller than that, electrons, neutrons, protons, but that's kind of about as far as we understand. We're not breaking down electrons into their component electrons. So when we start to get chips that are getting down to that level, the nanoscale, that's getting pretty small.
This is the thing, yeah. And so part of it is having a potential difference between sides of the transistor, and that requires having a gap between atoms. If you're getting down to the size where you've only got several atoms wide.
Yeah. So we've talked about nanometer chips for a little while now. There was a big hullabaloo, and I think it was Intel who first came up with some of the nanometer chips, 7 nanometer, 6 nanometer. Wow, that's getting really small now. IBM got to the first sub-nanometer, so 0.7 nanometers, being 10 to the minus 9, so that's small.
Tiny.
It's tiny, that's right, in non-SI terms. So getting below that 1 nanometer we'll see as a big threshold, but again, when you're starting to get into that atomic scale. So IBM has said, we've been making a mistake all these years. We've been building chips that have been horizontal. We've been building all the transistors on a single level. It's like having a bunch of apartment blocks, a bunch of houses, single-story houses, and we've got them all communicating with each other. Why haven't we gone up? Now, yes, they have gone up. A chip has got layers and layers, but each layer is kind of like its own layer. So they've said we should be going up, and they've called it, of course it's got to have the word nano in it if it's any good, they've called it a NanoStack. So effectively they're stacking the communication, the processing up rather than just out. Yeah, amazing, because you've got to start to think about it differently. We're at this level, we can't go any smaller. How are we going to make this faster? Because we've got to beat China with their latest line shine. So how are we going to do that? Well, going up and stacking up is the way they're doing it. So it's probably, before we buy a computer that's got this sort of processor in it, it's a long time. I think 5 years, I'd safely say, maybe even 10 years before it's getting to the point where our desktop computer needs this level of complexity and power. But they'll probably be producing these chips commercially maybe in the next year or two for things like supercomputers or very large computers that need a lot of power. But I just love the idea that we've got to start to think about things differently because we're getting them so small.
Yeah, that's it.
That we just don't, the atom, we don't understand what's smaller than that. How can we go smaller than that? How are we going to make this better? I'm not really sure, and that's where IBM have gone to. So fascinating, and I do love the idea that we're just thinking about things differently.
There's, well, you talk about smaller than the atom, you've got to get into the standard model with all the quarks and leptons and fermions and all those sorts of things, and that produces other headaches. But it'll be interesting if they dive into that sort of subatomic level.
And maybe we might reach some sort of level, because you got to get to the point where you say, is it practical to go any further than that? So maybe you get to the point where, again, that other buzzword is quantum. So any product you want to produce now, nano, AI, quantum, cloud, they're the words that you need in there.
Yep.
But if you start to look at the way quantum computing might work, and I don't know if anyone actually really understands how quantum computing works at the moment, but if you start to think about that, then maybe that's where they'll have to go. So it's almost like start a whole new trajectory, a whole new line, rather than just try and get processes smaller and get those gaps lesser and lesser. It's a fascinating time to get to that subatomic scale.
For sure. Amazon's robotic warehouse is certainly something to behold. A perpetual hive of activity. These shuffling units pick up and drop off items to fulfill an endless shopping list. It runs perpetually to fill all of our urgent needs, everything from an emergency sarong to your must-have tongue scraper to the 8-piece bakeware set that you will finally complete your kitchen once and for all. A million of these things shuffling industriously around their grid pattern, politely giving way as needed, but always making the mail out in a timely fashion. Heaven forbid a human step foot on the floor. But in an effort to improve productivity even further, engineers are looking to blend humans back into the warehouse mix. But that's going to require a new breed of robot on the floor, Matt.
We've talked before about car companies, Ford in particular, looking at their collaborative robots. And they're
humanoid robots that we're using in those,
typically, yeah. So this is another example that Amazon's got here where they're talking about collaborative robots. So not replacing, sounds like a good marketing line, not replacing humans, but working collaboratively with humans and making it safer. So the PR machine is saying that the 1 million robots across Amazon's fulfillment centers, 1 million. That seems like a lot, doesn't it?
That's a lot of robots.
It's a lot of robots.
But if you ever see footage of it, it's just amazing to see these things in operation.
Exactly right. So they're quite fascinating. They do all sorts of things, transporting and sorting and stowing and picking up products. So they say that their robotics have seen a 41% reduction in workplace accidents, maybe because there's not as many people there now.
Yeah, of course.
And a 40% increase in goods delivered. And I assume that means speed of goods delivered because they're probably still delivering the same number of goods. But where we've seen some of the other robots, so for example, when we talked about the ones in the car factory, they were designed to lift smallish things and move around things and kind of do similar jobs to humans. So we can't lift things that are hundreds of kilograms in weight, unless you're talking about a bench press for someone very strong, but typically on the factory floor, we're not lifting those things. These robots are a little bit different. So they've got this robotics called Proteus, Proteus. It's a fully autonomous collaborative robot, and I don't want to argue with it because it can carry up to 410 kilos. It can carry me, I think, at that, basically.
Could carry several of you.
That's right. So you've got some large Amazon robots, Hercules and Titan, I like the names, and they've got shelving units that are 570 kilograms, over a ton, 1,130 kilograms, for example. But these robots are really designed just to move things around their factory, get them ready to go. But presumably they're working beside humans. But you do wonder with an autonomous robot, a collaborative autonomous robot, working alongside humans, how long it's before the robot says, "Why are you here, human? I don't need you. I can lift more than you. I'm not having a smoke break like you're doing all the time. Yeah. I'm not addicted to my phone, scrolling through everything. I'm just sitting here working away, delivering products, not getting injured." So it's getting further and further down that line. And I think some companies might say, no, we don't like that, we like humans. But the reality is, if you're going to be competitive in a modern environment, you're probably going to have some robots somewhere in your production line.
Here it comes. Now, from the files of Only in Japan, we bring you a story that is bound to confound you like it's confounded the hell out of me. This is from the land where the big ideas come from way out of left field and leave us scratching our heads with so many unanswered questions. Matt, we're looking at edible robots here, not swallow a robot and see what happens. These are please take a bite of my robot gummy robots. I got nothing.
These are not Proteus, just for the record here. You're not trying to eat a robot that can lift 410 kilograms.
But, hey, it's early days.
Early days, maybe, that's right. This is all about some people at the University of Electrocommunications in Japan wondering whether or not people were influenced by how something looked as to whether or not they like to eat it. Why do some people eat living things? Why do some people reject others? So if someone sat a mouse on my dinner table and said, there you go, there's dinner, I don't know that I'd really like to eat that. It just doesn't feel like it's something. But someone puts a bit of meat that came from a cow and it's sitting there on my plate, I eat it, it's okay. Some people might, and some people are vegetarians, they might want to, but I'm okay with eating that cow. But the mouse, I don't know, it just doesn't do it for me. It just doesn't feel like I really want to sink my teeth into that lovely little mouse sitting on there. Sometimes fish, you'll eat a piece of fish, but you have a piece of fish on your plate with the eyeball still in there, as you get at some restaurants.
Something different.
It is a bit different, isn't it? So, do I really want to do that?
We had a thing once that was called an octopus omelette. Now, I don't know if it had octopus in it, but it moved and there were things, sort of flakes of these things sort of waving about. And it wasn't because of the heat. They seemed to be moving independently, and I don't know what it was. It tasted delicious, though.
When you closed your eyes to put it in your mouth. So what they did at the Japan University of Electrocommunications was they created some edible robots. As you said, basically gummy bears, sugar, apple juice, or gummy confection. They use a pneumatic system to pump some air through it, just like when you go past some car yards, you've got the big floating arm and head man that's blown up through pneumatics. And essentially, they had it just moving side to side, and they had a little voice box elsewhere, so not in the robot, which talked, made different noises, maybe sounded like a very reasonable, sensible person, maybe it sounded like a little girl, all sorts of different things. And then they asked people whether or not they would be happy to eat that little robot there. They made them sometimes have some eyes and some little features on them. Sometimes they didn't. And using all this information, did it influence how likely you were to eat this little gummy bear? And the result was, didn't change much. So after all this work to create robots that were edible, they found that people just ate it up anyway. And so maybe the fact they knew that it was an inanimate object regardless, even though it looked and sounded like something that was real. But here's a really interesting one. I started thinking about it when I was reading through this information. I went, okay, let's say they dressed up the gummy robot to look like one of my kids or my wife or a family member.
Would you eat that?
And some family members definitely. So, but it's a strange thing. Just because it looked like someone that you're familiar with or someone that you wouldn't like to eat in real life, would that start to influence you? So I think there's more work for them to do. I'm going to send them off a message and say, make them more lifelike, make them more like a human. Would you feel comfortable eating a humanoid type person that looked like someone you knew?
And just a public service announcement, if anyone out there does end up purchasing a robot in the next sort of 12 months to maybe 36 months, don't eat it.
That's right. That's exactly right. Only these
we're not
particular
there
ones.
yet. We're not there yet. Don't eat robots.
Good advice.
In a world where the bad guys employ AI to work for them without rules or regulation, it makes sense that the police should fight fire with fire. Now, with the capacity to absorb far more data faster than humans could possibly ever hope to, and the ability to discern tiny details through a cloud of clutter, AI can potentially make decisions more quickly and better informed to support our law enforcement agencies around the world. Matt, AI is about to don a cape and a spandex suit, so look out, bad guys.
So Axon, many people will be familiar with Axon. Axon is really one of the first companies that drove the whole taser market, and I think that's a fantastic thing. In fact, I spoke to a policeman one day, and on the front of his vest was a very large yellow taser. And I found it interesting that it was so visible and it just was standing out in front of his chest. And I said, so it's interesting, he wasn't arresting me, by the way, he was just having a chat to me at an event. I said, so it's interesting that you've got the taser on the front there, very visible. Why? I didn't quite understand. And he said, well, people are scared of the taser. And I said, look, I'm a bit different. You've got a little gun sitting on your hip there. That to me feels like it'd do a bit more damage, and that might be, I'd be a bit more concerned about using that. And he said, but people think I'm not going to use the gun because it's a pretty drastic step to pull out a gun and shoot someone. If you're running away from me, I'm unlikely to shoot you. But people are concerned that I will tase you, and they've seen the movies, they see the result that it has on people. So they said people are more scared, which is interesting how psychology works, more scared of this big taser. So they stick the taser right on the front, and it's been a very effective law enforcement item, and probably for other things as well. But so Axon founder Rick Smith basically said, we've done the job for policing, we've done a fantastic thing for law enforcement with the taser. Interestingly enough, when tasers were first being looked at, and when obviously Axon were trying to sell them to various police departments and various law enforcement agencies, they were absolutely resisted, which I'm not sure why, because we look at it with current eyes rather than back in the past. What were people worried about? Like, surely again, a gun seems a bit scarier than a taser. But there was a shooting, there was a Ferguson shooting back in 2014, and suddenly police forces across America said, no, we've got to have those tasers. They seem like a good thing rather than having all our police out there with guns. So that kind of transformed the market. What Axon is now saying is, we believe we did a good thing for society there. The next good thing we can do is AI policing. We can get police reports done. We can use AI to help solve crimes. We can use AI in so many ways. Now, there's lots of AI tools out there. We know, we talk about them regularly. This is focused absolutely on law enforcement agencies trying to work out how they can use AI in law enforcement. And the example they keep saying is, look at us, we've done a great thing with tasers. There is a taser fired across the world once every 30 seconds. Now, I'm not saying every one of those is made by Axon, but that's how popular they've become.
Yeah, as non-lethal stopping force. Yeah.
No, that's right. And it doesn't sound great, does it, that they're popular? Because
yeah,
as I said it, I went, this doesn't sound great.
Electrocute people.
That's right. But essentially, obviously, it's a really important thing across law enforcement. So AI, this is Axon's AI system that can answer policy questions during incidents, because I'm impressed when I see a police officer turn up on TV, they've read the script and they start quoting which law they're arresting someone under. And I go, well, they must have a fairly good handle on the law, or maybe they just bluffed their way through it. I'm not sure. But essentially, you've got to know different policies, you've got to know different laws, you've got to be able to answer information, but also I can just see AI being incredibly useful in solving crimes, especially some cold cases. Go and throw some AI at cold cases. So that's the next big thing from Axon. I'm not trying to say go and buy their shares or anything. I'm just saying that there are so many different areas, there are so many different departments, so many different organisations who are saying AI is the future for our organisation. Some of them may just be trying to bump their share price up, I'm not sure, but this seems like a fairly legitimate use of actually taking AI, and as you said, the crims are using it. Why don't we have the good guys using it as well?
Yeah. Something to alleviate some of the work hours and pressure off our law enforcement.
Surely that would be a good thing.
And that's all we have for you today, folks. The horn has sounded and this ship is disembarking, headed for crystal clear waters and sandy beaches. It's floral garlands and sunscreen for us. We are out of here. Thanks for another cracking tech talk, Matt.
And I'm just going to say I'm not going to go and sit on my phone and play for the next few hours. I'm just going to have a little break from my phone and just make sure I'm not one of those
ones.
Put it
aside until you, I
just wonder about what happened with that. Oh, it's hard, isn't it?
Thanks for tuning in once again, folks. Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson is brought to you each week by a small team of dedicated and very clever humans, but delicately packed into decorative boxes by pixies with pointy hats and tinkly bells. I'm James Eddy, wishing you all happy and productive week. We'll be back in another 7 days with another grab bag of stories to give you a head start into the future and the brave new world that awaits you. Why not bring along a friend for the ride? Until next time, take care and we'll see you when we see you.